His lawyer leaned closer and whispered 5 words. Just 5. And Vincent's face, that proud, confident face I had looked at across the breakfast table for 15 years, turned completely white. His hand began to shake. The papers he had been so excited to sign trembled like leaves in a storm. And me? For the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I'm moving too fast. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how we reached this moment. How a woman everyone thought had lost her mind was actually playing the longest, calmest game of her life. My name is Alexis Dunst. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Vincent Mercer. 15 years of marriage. That's longer than most Hollywood relationships, longer than some small countries have existed, and honestly, much longer than my patience should have lasted. But I'm stubborn. I inherited that from my grandmother. I met Vincent when I was 17. I had finished high school early, not because I was brilliant, but because I was practical, focused, and desperate to leave my parents' house. I got a job at Henderson and Price law firm as a file clerk. Minimum wage, endless paper cuts, but it was my job. By 18, I worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details, good with numbers, and very good at staying quiet while paying attention. Vincent was 24 when we met at a client event. He was charming, ambitious, and full of big dreams about building a real estate empire. He talked about the future as if it already belonged to him, like success was just waiting for him to arrive and take it. He said he would build something amazing. I told him I could help with the paperwork. Romantic, right? We got married when I was 19. Tyler was born when I was 20. I continued working part-time at a law firm while raising our son, growing my 401k, and saving every extra dollar. My grandmother always said a woman should have her own money. Not secret money, she would say. Just her own, something no one could take away. When I was 23, Vincent's business finally started to succeed. He asked me to quit the law firm and work with him full-time. He needed someone to manage the finances, deal with clients, coordinate contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became his unpaid everything. Bookkeeper, office manager, client coordinator, interior designer for model homes, marketing assistant, event planner. I did all of it while raising Tyler, running our home, and somehow keeping everyone fed and mostly happy. My official title was wife. My real job was everything else. For 11 years, I gave my time, energy, and skills to building Vincent's dream. For 11 years, he received the credit, the awards, and the praise. At every industry event, I was introduced as Vincent's wife. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, and his vision. But somehow, he never quite got around to thanking me. Somewhere along the way, things changed. Vincent stopped asking for my opinion. He started making decisions without me. He began working late more and more often. Then came the criticism, the way I dressed, the food I cooked, my so-called lack of ambition. Lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free, raising his son, and keeping his life perfectly organized. But sure, I wasn't ambitious enough. Then, 3 months ago, he dropped the bomb. He came home on a Tuesday evening. I was cooking dinner, his favorite meal, actually, because I'm clearly someone who enjoys putting effort into things that go unnoticed. He sat me down at the kitchen table with a serious look on his face. Not sad, not guilty, just cold and professional. I want a divorce, he said. And I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Tyler. He said it the way someone orders food. I'll take the assets. You hold the child. As if our 15-year-old son was a leftover pizza. Like Tyler was an inconvenience he was generously allowing me to keep. I just stared at him. 15 years of marriage, ending at the kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish, like I was just another item he was throwing away. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't learn until later, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Harold Whitfield. Expensive, experienced. He had been carefully building his exit strategy while I was planning meals and booking his dentist appointments. I had been blindsided by the man I trusted with everything. The next day, his mother arrived, Lorraine Mercer, a woman who had treated me like hired help for 15 years, showed up with her perfectly styled hair and her well-practiced look of sympathy. She patted my hand and told me I should have tried harder to keep her son happy. "Men have needs, dear," she said, like she was explaining something difficult to a slow child. Lorraine giving marriage advice was always interesting, especially since her husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course just to avoid being alone with her. But yes, somehow I was a problem. That first week was a blur. Vincent moved me into the guest room. Papers were prepared. Settlements were proposed. Timelines were set. Everything moved so fast that I felt like I was drowning. To the outside world, I looked like a woman whose life had collapsed. A wife being discarded after 15 years of service. A victim who never saw it coming. But here's the truth. What Vincent didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 years earlier, I had found something. Something buried deep inside his own financial records. Something he believed was hidden forever, and I had been quietly, patiently preparing ever since. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit the subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment. Thank you. Now, back to the disaster. Within a week of the announcement, Vincent had taken full control. The guest room became my permanent space in what used to be our home. My closet went from a walk-in to 2 small sections, ones he kindly allowed me to keep. The message was clear. This was no longer my house. Within 2 weeks, he started bringing her around. Brittany Sawyer, 27 years old. She worked at his company. Of course she did. She had that perfect social media look. Blonde highlights, perfect nails, yoga pants that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it. She wore my apron, my grandmother's apron, while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she made great smoothies, so I guess that counted for something. Vincent showed her off like a prize. They sat on my couch, watched my television, and ate from my plates. He wrapped his arm around her right in front of me, as if I were furniture, as if I had already disappeared. The humiliation grew worse every day. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate finances," he said, like he was being fair. Then he canceled the joint card. After that, he suggested I should probably find another place to stay while we worked things out. My own home, and I was being asked to leave it. Lorraine came over to help me pack. And by help, I mean she went through my things and decided what I was allowed to keep. Old clothes were fine. Some family photos. My grandmother's recipe box. She paused on that one, like she was thinking about keeping it for herself. What I was not allowed to take. Any jewelry Vincent had given me over 15 years. Any furniture I had chosen. Anything valuable. Those are marital assets, Lorraine explained, and Vincent is entitled to them. She packed my belongings in garbage bags. Not boxes, garbage bags, like I was trash being thrown away. Through all of this, there was one person I believed I could trust. Diane Holloway. We had been friends since high school, 20 years of friendship through boyfriends, breakups, babies, and everything in between. She was the first person I called after Vincent told me he wanted a divorce. She was supportive, always checking in, always asking how I was holding up, always ready to listen. She came over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better. She told me Vincent was making a huge mistake. But something felt wrong. Small things at first. Vincent seemed to know my plans before I shared them. When I told Diane I was thinking about fighting for the house, Tyler came home the next day saying Dad had told him it wouldn't work. When I mentioned to Diane that I was looking at apartments in a certain neighborhood, Vincent casually commented that the area was too expensive for me. And then it clicked. Looking back, I should have noticed it years earlier. The way Diane always lit up when Vincent entered the room. The way she praised him just a little too much. Laughed at his jokes a little too hard. She always asked about him first whenever we talked. How's Vincent? How's the business? Is Vincent happy? Diane had been carrying feelings for my husband for 15 years. And Vincent, because he collected admirers the way some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use that. He made her feel special, important, different from other women. He probably hinted that they might end up together after the divorce. Gabe had just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend had become his spy. 20 years of friendship sold out for a little flirting and a handful of empty promises. Honestly, Diane could have at least charged more. But the worst part wasn't Vincent. It wasn't Lorraine. It wasn't even Diane. The worst part was Tyler. My son saw everything. The girlfriend. His grandmother packing my bags. The way his father looked at me like I didn't matter. And Vincent worked on him every day, slowly poisoning his mind. Your mom is making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Tyler started pulling away from me. Not angry, just distant. Confused. He didn't know who to believe. And his father was very, very convincing. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything I spent 15 years building. But watching my son look at me like I was a problem, that was the real pain. That was the wound that actually bled. I hired a lawyer, Nina Castellano, recommended by my old firm, 52 years old, sharp as a razor, zero patience for nonsense. She reviewed everything and laid out the plan. You helped build this business, she said. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight. I looked at her for a long moment. What if I don't want to fight? Nina stared at me like I'd started speaking another language, like I'd suggested sending Vincent a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought I was broken, depressed, too beaten down to stand up for myself. She had no idea. Tyler and I moved into a small apartment. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of my old pantry. Half our boxes didn't even fit. They were stacked in the corner of Tyler's room, a quiet monument to how far we'd fallen. Meanwhile, Vincent posted photos with Brittany. New chapter. New energy. Blessed, he wrote. Lorraine commented underneath. So happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve joy. My sister called me. Furious. You need a shock lawyer. Take him for everything he's worth. Everyone had advice. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who had given up, someone who couldn't fight back and was letting her husband walk all over her. Everyone was wrong. Here's the thing about being underestimated. People stop watching you. They stop being careful. They stop guarding their secrets. And that's exactly when you learn everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I had been carrying this secret. That's how long I had known the truth about Vincent Mercer and his glittering, glamorous, completely fake empire. It began on a random Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Vincent was working late again. By then, he was always working late, though I didn't yet understand what that really meant. I was reviewing the company books, balancing accounts, doing the boring work that kept his business alive. That's when I noticed something strange. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a pattern. Money was flowing out of our accounts into places I had never seen before. I dug deeper. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, following the trail. What I found made my blood turn cold. Vincent had been taking loans against everything we owned. The house, our beautiful house that everyone admired, had 3 mortgages. The original loan, $400,000. A second mortgage, $350,000, taken out 4 years earlier. A third mortgage, $350,000, taken out 2 years earlier. Total owed, $1.1 million. Actual value of the house, $850,000. We were underwater by $250,000 on a home I believed we owned outright. The business was even worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed, $85,000. Vendor debts, $120,000. Equipment loans, $75,000. The company Vincent bragged about at every party, the one everyone thought was thriving, was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars weren't real. All 3 were leased, with massive balloon payments coming due. We didn't truly own anything. We just had extremely expensive monthly bills. I sat in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, surrounded by printed papers, and did the math. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Total real asset value, maybe $1.6 million. We were at least $300,000 in the hole, probably more. So where had all the money gone? I kept digging. Over the next few weeks, I traced every transaction I could find, and the picture that formed was devastating. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000, all gone. Gambling losses, $75,000, gone. An apartment I didn't know about. Rented for a woman I didn't know about. Rent and furniture, $60,000. Lifestyle expenses that never reached our home. Watches, suits, trips I was never invited on. Another $85,000. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards, using borrowed cards, while everything burned. We looked rich the way a mannequin looks alive. Convincing from a distance. Completely hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But I knew Vincent. I had watched how he operated for years. If I confronted him, he would manipulate me. He would explain everything away, make me feel crazy for questioning him. He would probably find a way to blame me, and was, if he knew that I knew, might try to take control of my separate money too. You see, I had always kept something of my own. My grandmother's voice was always in my head. A woman should have her own money. I still had my IRA from my law firm days. I rolled it over when I quit, but I never touched it. By then, it had grown to about $180,000. That money was mine, earned through my own work, legally separate property. And then there was my grandmother herself. She passed away when I was 28 and left me $340,000. Her will was very clear. This money is for Alexis alone. I kept it in a separate account for 6 years. I never mixed it with Vincent's finances. I never used it for household expenses. My grandmother had kept her own account for 50 years. Not secret money, she always said, just mine. The smartest woman I ever knew. Altogether, I had about $520,000 that was completely, legally, mine. So I didn't confront Vincent. Instead, I protected myself. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant, to set up an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My IRA and my inheritance went into that trust. My name wasn't listed as a beneficiary. Vincent's name certainly wasn't anywhere near it. The trust was for Tyler's future. College, a first home, emergencies, and it was untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and kept them at my sister's house. I placed copies in a safe deposit box. I saved everything on an encrypted drive. And then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave one day. Men like him always do. They get bored. They find someone younger. Or they decide they deserve more. I just needed to be ready. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig the hole deeper. 3 years of smiling at dinner parties while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. I became very good at patience. And very good at pretending I didn't know my husband was financially drowning us both. So when Vincent finally asked for a divorce, when he demanded the house, the cars, the business, everything, I almost laughed. He wasn't asking for assets. He was demanding debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back in the present, I sat across from Nina Castellano and placed 3 thick binders on her desk. 3 years of evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account. She read in silence for nearly an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression had completely changed. "You've known about this for 3 years," she asked. "I was waiting for him to leave," I said. "I knew he would. And when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt. He just doesn't understand that yet." Nina leaned back in her chair. The pity in her eyes was gone. The concern was gone. What replaced it was something close to awe. "So when you sign over the assets," she said slowly, "you walk away clean. And he gets the mortgages, business debts, lease obligations. All of it would become his responsibility. And my inheritance, my retirement account, separate property, never mixed, legally protected, would sit safely in a trust for my son." Nina was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Mrs. Dunst," She said, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you had given up." I smiled back. Everyone thinks that. That's kind of the point. Nina went from looking at me like a lost kitten to looking at me like a chess grandmaster. I prefer grandmaster. Better wardrobe. The trap was already set. The numbers were verified. The documents were airtight. All I had to do now was let Vincent believe he was winning. And nobody plays a graceful loser better than a woman who has been practicing for 15 years. The next 3 months were a masterclass in acting. I became exactly what everyone expected me to be. Broken, defeated, barely holding on. I showed up to mediation with red eyes and shaking hands. I spoke softly, carefully, like a woman who had lost all confidence. I asked for so little that even the mediator looked uncomfortable. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our second session. "I'm not trying to make things difficult. I know the business is his life's work. I know the house means everything to him. I don't want to hurt our family any more than it already is." I asked for $50,000 in cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Tyler. That was it. Vincent agreed immediately. He had probably expected me to fight for half of everything. Any reasonable lawyer would have. Instead, I was asking for crumbs. He looked at me across the mediation table with something close to pity, like I was a wounded animal he was kindly putting out of its misery. I deserved an Oscar for that performance, or at least a Golden Globe. It was a role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, cheating, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. As the weeks passed, Vincent's arrogance grew. He stopped being careful, stopped pretending to be reasonable. He told anyone who would listen that I hadn't even fought. She just gave up, he told his golf buddies. I offered her a fair deal, and she took it without a word. Lorraine was even worse. She bragged at her book club, at church, at every social event. "Vincent is keeping everything. That woman didn't get a dime." I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son. To celebrate his coming victory, Vincent bought himself a new watch. $15,000. I know because I saw the charge on the business account. He was still using company money for personal expenses, still digging that hole deeper. He wore the watch to our next mediation session, making sure I noticed. He also took Brittany to dinner at La Maison, the French restaurant where we had celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted photos online. "Life is, with the right person," he wrote. The right person, meaning the person who didn't know about his debt yet. Meanwhile, Brittany had started redecorating my house. New furniture in the living room. New artwork on the walls. She even painted my kitchen gray. Gray. I had spent 3 full weeks choosing that soft sage green. 3 weeks of paint samples, lighting tests, and second-guessing myself to get the perfect shade. And she covered it with cheap, builder-grade gray like it meant nothing. Gray like her personality. Gray like her future with Vincent once she discovered he was broke. Honestly, very fitting. Diane kept calling, pretending to care, fishing for information under the mask of friendship. I played my part perfectly. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice heavy with fake concern. I just wanted to be over. I said, letting my voice crack a little. "I can't fight anymore. I don't have the strength." Within hours, Vincent would know. I could almost feel him relaxing, letting his guard drop even more. Diane thought she was manipulating me. In reality, she was just acting as a free message service. Not a very smart one, either. But while the adults were busy playing games, Tyler was watching. And my son, smart, observant, and far wiser than anyone gave him credit for, was starting to notice things that didn't add up. He noticed his dad's new $15,000 watch, but heard Vincent say they couldn't afford the school trip to Washington, D.C. He noticed Brittany's shopping bags piling up in the hallway, but heard Vincent complain about money being tight. He noticed the gap between the lifestyle his father showed off and the excuses he kept making. One evening, Tyler came to my small apartment and sat down at my second-hand kitchen table. He looked at me with those serious eyes, so much like his father's, but with something Vincent had lost long ago. Honesty. "Mom," he said quietly, "is Dad actually rich?" I looked at him for a long moment. "What do you think?" He paused, thinking carefully. "I think something's wrong. I think you're pretending." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Trust me," I said softly. "Just wait a little longer." My 15-year-old figured it out before 2 lawyers and a certified accountant did. I should probably charge his college fund for consulting services. Behind the scenes, Nina was preparing our legal strategy with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement clearly stated that I was giving up all claims of marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Vincent. In return, I would receive my small cash settlement and walk away. But attached to that agreement was an addendum, a detailed liability disclosure statement. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every financial obligation connected to those assets. When Vincent signed for the assets, he would also legally accept all the liabilities. The mortgages would become his responsibility alone. The business debts would transfer entirely to him. The lease obligations on the cars would be his. Good when yo. Problem alone. It was all there in black and white. Legal. Proper. Devastating. Legal documents are like poetry, Nina once told me. Boring, expensive poetry that can ruin someone's life. My favorite kind. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Harold Whitfield, Vincent's lawyer, called Nina with concerns. "My client is taking on significant assets," Harold said carefully. "I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize anything, just to verify the numbers." Nina kept her voice calm. "Of course, we'll provide whatever documentation you need." But when Harold brought the idea to Vincent, my soon-to-be ex shut it down immediately. "No audit," Vincent said. "I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying an accountant to tell me what I already know." Harold pushed back. "I strongly recommend we verify the asset values before you sign. This is a serious decision." Vincent cut him off. "Brittany wants this done. I want this done. No more delays." Harold had been practicing law for over 30 years. He knew when a client was about to make a mistake. He also knew he couldn't force someone to listen. So he presented Vincent with a waiver, a document stating that Harold had recommended an independent financial review and that Vincent was refusing against legal advice. Vincent signed it without reading a word, just like everything else. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to make a man skip the fine print. Brittany was worth millions to me in legal strategy. The night before the hearing, Vincent sent me a text message. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I stared at my phone for a long time. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his life. And he was thanking me for not making things difficult while he threw me away. I typed back, "I just want what's best for Tyler." And I meant it. What was best for Tyler was his trust fund, his future secured, and a father who was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Nina called me that evening. Thursday, 9 a.m. final hearing. "Judge Patricia Holden, are you ready?" I looked around my small apartment. The second-hand furniture, the boxes still sitting in the corner. The tiny kitchen I had painted sage green because it reminded me of hope. I'd been ready for 3 years. 3 years of waiting. And now, it was finally here. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning, if Christmas morning involved divorce court and financial revenge. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Vincent would walk into that courtroom expecting to collect his prize. He had no idea he was about to inherit a financial avalanche, one he had signed for himself. And the best part? He had asked for it. In writing. With witnesses. If you've made it this far, you already know something very satisfying is coming. Hit the like button if you're ready for Vincent to get exactly what he deserves. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I've got more stories like this. Trust me. Now, let's finish this. Thursday, April 17th, 9 a.m. Courtroom 4B. I remember every detail of that morning. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The smell of old wood and floor polish. The quiet murmur of lawyers shuffling papers. This was where 15 years of marriage would officially end. And where 3 years of patience would finally pay off. Vincent arrived first. Of course, he wore his best suit, the charcoal Armani I had helped him pick out for a client dinner 3 years ago. His new watch caught the light as he shook hands with Harold. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to close a very favorable deal. Brittany was waiting in the hallway. She wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but she wanted moral support. I caught a glimpse of her through the door. Perfect makeup, designer bag. Scrolling through her phone like this was just another boring appointment. Lorraine was there too, sitting in the gallery, dressed up for the occasion, probably planning to take Vincent to a celebratory lunch afterward. She looked at me as I walked in and gave me that little smile, the kind you give someone you've already beaten. I arrived a few minutes later. Simple navy dress. No jewelry. Hair pulled back in a low bun. I looked tired, defeated, like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. Perfect. I looked like someone who'd given up on life and fashion at the same time. Very convincing. I should really teach acting classes. Judge Patricia Holden entered. Everyone rose. She was in her early 60s, silver hair, reading glasses perched on her nose. 30 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every trick, every manipulation, every lie that divorcing couples could throw at her. Nothing surprised her anymore. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. Mercer versus Mercer. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Harold stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client, Vincent Mercer, is assuming all marital assets, including the family residence, the real estate business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Dunst receives a cash settlement of $50,000. Nina rose beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to give up all claims to these assets and accept the proposed settlement. Judge Holden's eyes moved to me. She studied my face for a moment, looking for signs of coercion, signs that I was being pressured into a bad deal. Mrs. Dunst, she said, I need to confirm that you understand what you are agreeing to today. You are giving up claims to substantial property, the family home, the business you helped build. Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft, slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And you are entering this agreement voluntarily. No one is pressuring you. No, Your Honor. I looked down at my hands, then back up at her. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. Judge Holden studied me for another long moment. I could practically see her thinking. Should she push harder, order delay, protect me from what looked like a terrible decision? But I had counsel. I answered clearly. I was an adult woman making my own choice. Very well, she said finally. Let's proceed. The clerk handed out the final documents, page after page of legal language, signatures required on every third page. Vincent signed eagerly, barely looking at what he was agreeing to. He wanted this done. He wanted to get back to his new life, with his new girlfriend and his new freedom. I signed slowly, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was careful and precise. This was the moment I had waited 3 years for. I was going to savor it. Across the courtroom, I saw Vincent glance at Lorraine and smile. She nodded back, approvingly. In the hallway, his phone buzzed, probably Brittany sending encouragement. He checked it in court during his own divorce hearing. That was the kind of man he was. Meanwhile, Harold Whitfield was doing what good lawyers do, reviewing the complete document package one final time. Main agreement signed. Asset schedule signed. Settlement terms signed. Then he reached the addendum. Liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read, confusion flickering across his features. He flipped back a page, then forward, hoping he had misread something. He hadn't. Harold's face went pale. He leaned toward Vincent, whispering discreetly, Sir, we need to talk. Vincent waved him off, still basking in his victory. Not now. We're almost done. Harold's voice was urgent. You're assuming all debt. Vincent finally looked at what he had signed. The liability disclosure, he whispered. The mortgages, the business loans, everything. Harold said, papers rustling. You are assuming personal liability for all of it. For the first time, Vincent's eyes scanned the numbers. I watched the color drain from his face. House, $1.1 million owed. Market value, $850,000. Business debts, $480,000 combined. Vehicles, $115,000 in lease obligations. Additional personal liabilities, $200,000. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Net value of everything he claimed, negative $300,000. He hadn't won the lottery. He had won the bill for it. Vincent stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "This isn't right," he shouted. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers. "She hid this from me. This is fraud." Judge Holden's voice was sharp. "Mr. Mercer, sit down. These numbers are correct." Vincent insisted, voice rising. "She manipulated the documents." The judge left no room for argument. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer." And just like that, his smug, self-satisfied face, the face I had stared at for 15 years, went completely white. The papers he had been so eager to claim shook in his hands. His victory had turned into defeat in seconds. And for the first time in 3 years. I smiled. Vincent sat, but his hands were shaking. His confident smile was gone, replaced by panic. Judge Holden looked at the documents, then at him. "Mr. Mercer, I'm looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with the assets you are claiming, assets in your name, your business, your property." She fixed him with a hard stare. "Are you telling this court that you don't know your own financial situation?" Silence. Watching Vincent try to explain his ignorance was like watching Cat explain a broken vase on the floor, fascinating and completely unconvincing. Harold cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I advise my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing." He declined. "I have documentation." He produced a waiver, the one Vincent had signed without reading, clearly stating that Harold recommended a full audit, and Vincent refused. Judge Holden reviewed it briefly. "So, Mr. Mercer, you were advised to verify these figures. You chose not to. You signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. Is that correct?" Vincent stared at the waiver like it had just bitten him. "I didn't," he began. "Is that your signature, Mr. Mercer?" the judge asked. A long pause. "Yes," he admitted. "Then you assumed this risk voluntarily. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement stands." Desperation broke through his composure. "You knew," he said, voice cracking. "You knew about all of this." I met his eyes calmly. "I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Vincent. I knew everything." His face cycled through emotions faster than I could count. Confusion, rage, betrayal, fear, and finally, the one I'd been waiting for, realization. He had done this to himself. "I want to withdraw the agreement," he said, turning to the judge. "I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair." Judge Holden shook her head. "Mr. Mercer, you signed documents in this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined additional review. Your wife did not hide anything. These are your debts, your mortgages, your obligations. The agreement is final." The gavel came down. "Mrs. Dunce, you have your settlement. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets you agreed to, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved." I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse, and looked at Vincent one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered, his whole world collapsing around him. "You said you wanted everything except Tyler," I said quietly. "I gave you exactly what you asked for." I walked out of that courtroom, finally free and finally victorious. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear Vincent yelling at Harold, demanding to know how this happened, threatening lawsuits. Harold stayed calm. "I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused." Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's face change as she listened. She looked at Vincent, really looked at him, and finally saw something other than the successful businessman she thought she was getting. She was gone before I reached the elevator. Heels clicking on the marble floor, moving fast, not looking back. Her exit was quicker than her entrance into my life. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunshine. The sky was blue. The air was warm. Behind me, my ex-husband was screaming at his lawyer about fairness, fraud, and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was a new life. Smaller, simpler, but entirely mine. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Brittany had moved out, leaving a note. "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray kitchen sat empty. Within a month, Vincent tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than it's worth, there are no buyers, just banks calling about missed payments and realtors suggesting short sales. Within 2 months, the business started defaulting. Vendors filed lawsuits. The line of credit was frozen. The company Vincent bragged about, the company I supported for 11 years, was crumbling. Within 3 months, Vincent was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who once bragged about his empire was now calculating which assets he could save. The answer, almost nothing. Lorraine's perfect son was calling family members for loans, showing up at relatives' houses with excuses. Nobody knew about the debt, except for the documents. The mortgages, loans, gambling debts, crypto losses, secret apartment, all his name, all his responsibility. That year, Lorraine's Christmas newsletter was short. "Vincent is exploring new opportunities." Yes, opportunities in debt restructuring. Diane called about a week after the hearing. Her voice shook. "I had no idea things were this bad. I'm so sorry, Alexis. I never meant." I didn't answer, didn't respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some friendships don't deserve a second chance. 20 years of history betrayed for a wink and empty promises from a man who used everyone around him. She tried calling 3 more times, then gave up. I didn't, because now, finally, I was free. She stopped calling. I imagine she's still waiting for Vincent to notice her. She'll be waiting a long time. Lorraine tried a different approach, through Tyler. "Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry. I want to talk." Tyler looked at the woman who'd packed my belongings in garbage bags, who'd called me worthless, who'd sided with his father without a second thought, and he said, "Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses." Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess which one of us got what we wanted? Tyler, my smart, observant son, finally understood everything. Not because I explained it, but because he figured it out himself. He saw the court documents, heard his father's excuses, watched Brittany leave, watched Lorraine scramble, watched the whole facade collapse. About a month after the divorce, we sat together in my small apartment, the one with a sage green kitchen, second-hand furniture, and boxes finally unpacked. "You waited 3 years," he said quietly. "You knew this whole time and just waited." I nodded. "I wanted to make sure you'd be protected. Whatever happened between your father and me, I needed to know you'd be okay." The trust fund, $520,000, safe, untouchable. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then hugged me, really hugged me. The kind of hug I hadn't gotten from my 15-year-old in months. The kind that said, "I understand. I'm proud of you." My $50,000 settlement went toward getting established. First month's rent, security deposit, basic furniture. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was, Tyler's future secure. And me? I enrolled in interior design courses at community college. The dream I'd put on hold at 23 to help Vincent build his empire. I was finally building my own. My first real client was Sandra, 52, just ending a 28-year marriage. She stood in her empty apartment, looking lost. "How do you start over?" she asked. I thought for a moment. One room at a time, one color at a time, one day at a time. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when she saw it. "Happy tears," she said, "the color of new beginnings." About 3 months after the divorce, Vincent showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him. Weight lost, dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled, watch gone. He looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost. "I didn't know it was this bad," he said. "I made mistakes. I know that now. I didn't mean for any of this." I leaned against the doorframe and really looked at him. This man I'd loved for almost half my life. This man who'd thrown me away. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Maybe we can figure something out." I paused. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Couldn't bring himself to ask for what he really wanted. My help. After everything, I said calmly. You asked for everything except Tyler. You got exactly what you wanted. Alexis, please. Goodbye, Vincent. I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know because I watched through the peephole while eating ice cream. Best show I'd ever seen. 5 stars. Would watch again. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I sat in my living room and looked at my grandmother's photo on the shelf. The recipe box next to it. The one thing Lorraine had almost taken. The one thing that mattered most. You were right about everything, Grandma, I whispered. Keep your own money. Know your worth. Never let anyone make you feel small. The apartment was small, quiet, nothing like the house I'd lived in for 15 years. But it was mine. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every decision. Mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free. Thank you for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You'll love it. See you in the next.